I truly could not think of a better way to close out not only the Ontario Hockey League season, but our season on OHL Stories, the podcast, on two fronts. One is we bring in the Dean of the Ontario Hockey League, Mr. Terry Doyle. The other is Pope's not here, which is it's just a bonus and a break for me. So Terry, thanks for stepping in and filling in and joining us on the final episode of the season of OHL Stories.
I guess that wasn't very nice for me to give a thumbs up that Pope's not here. Maybe he'll see it, maybe he won't. But you know what? He dishes it out. He can take it as well.
Exactly. And we'll be lucky that Pope gets himself out of whatever drunken gutter that he is in to even observe this. Oh, speaking of, I don't want to give too much away, but if Pope's away, or you want to go by his place to make sure he's still alive or something like that. This is how we keep an eye on things in our communities, just like Waterloo Regional Crime Stoppers does. Our proud partners and sponsors of this podcast. Remember that if you see a crime in progress or something that you might think will be valuable to police, you can make an anonymous call to 1-800-222-TIPS. And if that tip leads to an arrest, you will be paid cash. It's a cash award. You can go online to waterloocrimestoppers.com and do it that way as well. But this is a volunteer-run organization. Watch for the golf tournament coming up in August, something to do this summer. Support the organization and really help keep your neighborhood safe by calling 1-800-222-TIPS. Your anonymity is guaranteed, and your tip could lead to a cash award if an arrest is made in that case. I think, Terry, when I look back, and I said this during Game 7, Hamilton-Windsor, I don't think the league could have asked for anything better in a championship final to kind of reignite some passion for the junior game.
Absolutely. That was a great final, Hamilton and Windsor. And, it was very interesting, of course, because there was no crossover this year. And sure, they would have played each other once in each building, which doesn't necessarily gives you a little sample, but doesn't give you a full-on taste of what to expect. But it was kind of like the old World Series, American League, National League, never seeing each other, these two teams. And with lack of crossover in general, other than a few exceptions, how was the East and the OHL versus the West? And sure, there were people who thought, oh yeah, Windsor might take a game from Hamilton because Hamilton had gone 12-0 in the first 3 rounds. And it turned into just an awesome series. And of course, in Hamilton, they had so many fans there. It was great to see the big crowd pushing towards 12,000 for the final game. And in Windsor, of course, spirited crowds sold out games. And it was just great. And, I'm in Windsor right now as we talk. And they had a viewing party at City Hall in Windsor for Game 7 as well. And, by the time the game ended, it was a little quiet because I'd sort of walked by the area with probably about 3 minutes to go. And it was decided and things were pretty quiet, but they had City Hall in red lights and things like that as well for the Spitfires. So I think it really helped engage both communities and engage the league as well.
The Windsor Spitfires took a little bit of drama out of the final early because I was texting you. I called you the Dean of the OHL for a reason, just to check in on the record stats that Hamilton was chasing. Obviously 14-0 out of the gates, held by the Ottawa 67s of 2019, and still the record because Hamilton made it 12-0. Hamilton does finish. No, they didn't. They were 16-3 in the playoffs, so they couldn't equal London's mark done twice. But I had texted you just to check on those records, and then Windsor wins the first game of the final. So much for 14-0 to start the playoffs.
So it's your fault. You jinxed it.
That must have been exactly.
The fact Hamilton won, they're okay with that now. But yeah, isn't that the way it works? And just to, let people behind the curtain. The more homework we do on a certain stat or a certain fact, it changes. It's like in baseball. If you start looking at the no-hitter records, there'll be a base hit up the middle. It's just the way it happens, or a little blooper over the second baseman's head. But yeah, it was certainly interesting to go back and look at some of those and some of the previous history around the league where teams maybe had won as many games, but they had shorter series or buys as well. You had situations where, of course, years ago, you would have a bye in the playoffs. That's kind of, to think of that now, it just seems so foreign. But there was a time not that long ago, back in the 90s, where teams would even have a bye, win the first round, have a bye through the second, or have a bye in the first round. Like, that's unheard of now.
You talked about those crowds in both Windsor and then the OHL championship record in Hamilton for Game 7, 11,779. I'm going to be honest, Terry, I wasn't sure that the league could pull this off. And by that, I mean these kinds of crowds, even in the final, which gives me a lot of hope that this momentum carries over into the next season, because I don't know your thoughts on the season that was. It was different for a lot of reasons, but I was starting to question whether or not the interest in the game might have waned just a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a case. You have some people that their time to get back in a crowded situation is staggered. Some people, hey, open the doors, I'm in. Other people wanted to wait longer. I talked to people who were just like, yeah, I'm just not that comfortable yet being around a crowd of people. Some people are like, hey, let me in, I'm good to go. So that factors in. Here we are playing in June. People aren't used to going to hockey games in a lot of cities, once mid-May hits, never mind into June. They've moved on to other things. I think there were just so many things, so many factors going in. I know deep in the Flint Windsor series, for example, they didn't, resorted to some giveaways in terms of partnering with charitable organizations and nonprofits to get tickets into fans' hands, which years ago would be unheard of for the seventh game of the Western Final. But teams are being creative, knowing, hey, we want that atmosphere, get butts in the seats. And I think, hopefully we do see that carry over in those cities at least. I think in the OHL, some of the cities are on islands a little bit. So while maybe take off in one city, does it take off again in another? But I think we get that momentum going. And I think we're seeing more and more people just wanting to go back to their usual activities. We're seeing travel and concerts and things that are going on. People are really flocking to because they've been cooped up. They want to get out there. And I think that's going to be hopefully a positive for the OHL moving forward to the fall.
All right, I want to talk about both of these teams that were in the final, Windsor and Hamilton. Before I do that, I have to remind you that it is on now here in the province of Ontario. In case you didn't know, DraftKings Sportsbook has arrived. So now you can legally bet on all of your favorite sports, from MMA to hockey to playoff hoops and so much more. And you can bet special parlays, spreads, money lines, and more. And you can do it now, like not later, not tomorrow, but right now from anywhere in the province of Ontario. Join the action, download the app, and explore everything DraftKings Sportsbook has to offer. For example, you want to celebrate the pursuit for the cup? DraftKings Sportsbook is offering a wide variety of betting markets for all of their customers. You can check out the DraftKings impressive features, including, and this is one of my favorites, same game parlays. So you select a game, you combine it with multiple bets like which team will win, the number of goals scored, and more for your shot to win big. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. And best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So get excited, Ontario. DraftKings Sportsbook is live. Go to the App Store, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now to get in on all of the action only at DraftKings Sportsbook. If you've got a gambling problem, we want to play responsibly, call Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600. 19 plus only, physically present in Ontario when you make those bets. Eligibility restrictions apply. See sportsbook.draftkings.com for details, and please play responsibly. DraftKings operates pursuant to an operating agreement with iGaming Ontario. These two teams in the final, Terry. Let's start with Windsor. I was going to kind of riff on the most interesting man in the world. The Windsor Spitfires don't always win playoff series, but when they win one, they win a lot. 2009, 2010 Memorial Cups, 2011 to the Western Conference Final. They win the Memorial Cup in 17 without winning a playoff round. They got knocked out in the first round, but won as hosts. And then this year, they win that round again, and they go all the way to Game 7 of the OHL Final. I know people love to talk about the London Knights and love to hate the London Knights for their success, but are the Windsor Spitfires not kind of, sort of among the model franchises in this league right now?
I would say they certainly are. They did, and it's kind of that oddity, the 2017 Memorial Cup champions, yet they went almost a decade without winning a playoff series. So it's kind of an interesting situation from that end. But you're right. Once they do win, they get on a roll. And it's interesting to go back. They were given a scare by the Sarnia Sting in the first round, by Ben Gaudreau and the Sarnia Sting in the first round, and taking them to 6 games. But it was just a case where, Wyatt Johnston, a dominant performance for him right from the time he was not selected for the World Juniors for Team Canada. He's been selected now for the summer camp this year, but when he was not selected last fall, he just took off. After that, the Dallas Stars first round pick, Will Cooley, can score it well. And you just look at that team, and then a lot of guys that just chip in and get the job done. On the back end, a Renwick and a Hano and a D'Amico and all those guys, Pasquale Zito, he was banged up a bit, but just guys who kind of are willing to do anything to get the job done. And then what do you say about Matthias Anishka, their goaltender, who was a backup for the London Knights, sort of forgotten about, really comes over and you think, okay, it's just a depth move, for example, so they at least have a solid goaltender with Xavier Medina. And Anishka was great all playoffs long. And I will admit, I wondered, this Windsor team, they're a team that's a bit of a free spirit team a little bit, and behind the scenes, not afraid to, hooting and hollering a little bit more than I've seen maybe with some other teams. And I wondered, would they put it together in the playoffs, or if things got, a little bit of adversity, would they maybe not stay glued together? But Mark Savard, Andy Delmore, and the coaching staff there just did an excellent job. They went down in games and were still able to come back. And I thought that was the turning point right there when you saw them bounce back in games. We even saw that in game 6 of the final, where they were down, still bounce back. And that's where a team, if they are that unit that's not afraid to, be down by a goal and still keep on going. And, say it starts, I think, with Wyatt Johnston, who Dallas Stars fans can be very excited about him, but credit that whole team. And I think that's where I think they surprised some people just how good they were. They had that winning streak down the stretch of the regular season, but just kept on going. And I guess that's that ultimate peaking at the right time. And maybe that little scare by Sarnia helped them to say, okay, guys, if we're going to do this, we've got to do things the right way, because we ran into a hot goalie with the Sarnia Sting, and look what happened. They pushed us to 6 games. And then after that, and a great series against Flint as well. And Flint was a team I thought could certainly make some noise. I really liked Luke Cavalin's game, their goaltender, and it really showed as he was able to steal a couple, and Windsor wins that one in 7, then pushes Hamilton to 7. So, full marks for that entire Windsor Spitfires team when things look, the whole playoffs and the way it played out.
Good reminder on the Flint Firebirds. I know we're focusing on the championship and we've had our chance to talk about the previous series, but just because you bring them up, here's a team that frankly might have had every reason to just fold up and go back home and call it a season. And these guys didn't. And they were kind of, at least from where I was sitting, Terry, the postseason darlings, ripe for a first round upset. A lot of people were talking about where they piled up wins early in the season against inferior opponents in Saginaw and Erie, for example, and they meet a pretty good team in Owen Sound in round number 1. But Flint, full marks for taking the ultimate runners up to 7 games in the second round.
Yeah, I think that Flint team, where they really sold me was in February. I saw them play 3 straight games over the course of a week coming out of Family Day. And Luke Cavalin played all 3 games, and he was excellent in those ones. He reminded me, and the Southpaw goalie thing helps a little bit, but he reminded me of the Grant Fuhrer playing for the Edmonton Oilers in their heyday, where Cavalin might give up 2 or he might give up 3, but you weren't getting that 4th one. And he would just get hot, and we saw that down the stretch. And I know, talking to our colleague Larry Malott in Guelph, and I mentioned that name around February, and then Guelph ran into Flint, of course, down the stretch, and he was sort of cursing me a little bit that, yeah, you told me he was going to be good, and I wasn't sure. Yeah, and you were right, and I'm a little disappointed he was so good against the Guelph Storm. So it was kind of fun from that end. But of course, Brennan Othman's so dangerous up front as well, and just some really good, gritty guys, O'Reilly Piercy, and certainly many other names. And you're right, full marks. They went through some adversity this season and battled, of course, and the schedule upside down with the American teams and dealing with all of that, but yet still put in. And I think that's the theme. We could talk about all 20 teams and coming through adversity, coming through a whole different situation this year. They're being told mid-afternoon, guys, you're not playing tonight. And then finding out, oh, wait, but you weren't supposed to play this day and you are playing this day, or you're playing this team instead of that team, and breaks and you name it. And I think that's the theme among all 20 teams in the league and the league office as a whole, that everyone adapted and got through this season.
Third round, of course, Western Conference final, they lose to the Windsor Spitfires in 7 games after leading 3-2. Okay, the Hamilton Bulldogs, the ultimate Ontario Hockey League champions. Many of us thought relatively early on in the season, at least midway around trade deadline time, that this was the team to beat in Hamilton. But I talked about Windsor maybe as a model franchise, Terry. I don't know how you look at Hamilton as anything but. Steve Staios builds another champion 4 years after the last one. And isn't that kind of what you want to see in the Ontario Hockey League, which is a cyclical league, as we know? But you look at, first rounders like Logan Morrison, Ryan Winterton, you make the acquisitions at the deadline for Arbor Jacki, Mason McTavish, and all of a sudden the pieces are in place for an Ontario Hockey League championship. They do it in 18, they do it again in 22.
Absolutely. And you're right. Staios, the moves he made, probably identifying, he and Jay McKee identifying what they need, and thought, okay, we want a good physical top end defenseman. Arbor Jacki has developed into that in the last 2 years coming out of, look at him pre-COVID versus post-COVID returning. Colton Kammer comes over during the COVID break, looking for a little bit more of an opportunity coming out of Sarnia, turns into their captain. Sure, missed some time with an injury, but was a horse on the blue line when he was play as well. And, Nathan Steos started with the Windsor Spitfires, of course, comes over and it fits right in, and, all plays out from that standpoint. And you mentioned some of the names up front, and there's just so many where they could come at you with so many, even some guys who probably don't get as much of attention around the league, who, if they were on other teams, like George Diaco and guys like that, if they're on another club, they're probably a little higher on the depth chart, but they had to accept their roles. And, they're all players that, you look at Hamilton's third line, they could slide up to probably at least a second line on another team, but looking for the overall good of the hockey club, and knowing that, they had to buy into the fact that you're maybe not going to get as much ice time as you would somewhere else, but you're going to win some hockey games. And it's worked out very well. And that's also a big credit to Jay McKee and the coaching staff, challenging them throughout the season so they wouldn't have it on cruise control. I know, talking to Jay a couple times over the year, especially at the outdoor game in Hamilton, where there were times they would dangle little carrots in front of them. For example, at the outdoor game, they wanted to come off the bus with a theme. They wanted, like, it's sort of been the thing in the NHL where you show up in a theme. Well, the players talked about a week before and said, hey, we want to do this. Well, I said, okay, go and win the next 2 games and you guys can do what you want to do. Just dangle that little carrot. And that's just smart coaching, where you find, be like, come on, coach, we're first place. Let us do what we want. No, you guys win the next 2 games and then we'll let you do what you want to do. And you just get into those little situations. And I know with Steve Steos as well, talking about those things, because that's how you keep a team motivated, rather than getting in cruise control and maybe getting sloppy where, hey, we're winning 5-1 every night and we're going for that 6th and then we're 7th and we're letting up on the defensive game as well. Instead, they've seemed to really stick to the game plan throughout the year, and it really showed. And I'm sure, got that wake-up call losing that first game against the Windsor Spitfires. Probably needed that, just to hit a little bit of a reset button and realize this is going to be a hard-fought series. It's not going to be cruise control, and that's full marks to that entire organization.
Good point on the coaching staff, because if there was any reason to go into cruise control, I think, if I got the math right, 51-7, playoffs included. That's the Hamilton Bulldogs record in calendar 2022, 51-7. How you don't have a little lull in there is a testament to how well coached and organized they were.
Absolutely. And it also shows where they're so deep that even if a few players get into a lull, there are other guys there that are able to step up. Your goaltender maybe doesn't have the greatest game, but you win 6-5 because you've got that, up front, you're so well. Or the other side of it, maybe your offense goes a little quiet for a game or a weekend and you win 3-2 and you win 2-1. But when you have that depth, that's such a huge factor. And we see that throughout the game of hockey. And when you can have that situation where those third line guys, especially for a playoff championship team, we've always seen that. Sure, Logan Morrison gets the MVP award for the playoffs, dominant scorer, but there are always those other guys that chip in along the way. You can look at any championship club and see, okay, this guy chipped in with a few, this guy chipped in with a few out of the third line. That was the difference.
I suspect, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, you're getting set to pack a bag and make it to Memorial Cup number how many in a row?
Well, let's put it this way. The last time a Memorial Cup game was played that I did not attend was 1999.
Okay, that's another way of putting it.
Starting at the opening game of the Halifax Mooseheads hosting the Barrie Colts back in 2000. The streak continues, and well, I got to get to St. John first in the next little bit. But overall, yes, the plan is for the streak to continue on with all the Memorial Cup games this century.
Back down to the Maritimes for this one in New Brunswick. Just a quick look ahead, Terry, to next season that promises. We've got schedules out now. Fans are starting. There seems to be some chatter, at least online. We're looking ahead to something that we anticipate to be much more normal in 22-23.
That's exactly it. And it was great. I know schedules coming out this week. And for me, it's first thing to say, okay, when are my really busy times? And when do I get a break? Because I have the advantage, of course, unlike you, I have the advantage where I can kind of maybe disappear when Sarnia is on the road for a weekend. If they're doing a full, an Eastern swing, for example, that's where Terry sometimes plans a little vacation for a couple of days. So you got to look at those openings, how long the Christmas break is. You look at that, but it was great to even just be able to go through that. And it's that normalcy. That's something every June schedule comes out and I go through it and say, okay, what weeks am I disappearing for hockey and what weeks am I disappearing for vacation? And for example, I think I have 4 home games in the first 8 days of the season after Sarnia is on the road for the first weekend. But just to be able to talk about those things and be able to have that sense is, so much fun from that standpoint. It's what we do. We have that passion for, and to be able to have that. And I think for me, it even started a few weeks back, actually on the May long weekend. Sarnia had their draft picks in. and a little bit of a camp for them, and had some of the returning players, then did an awards ceremony to recognize the players, the graduating players, and just had that feeling of almost kickstarting the normalcy towards next season, the excitement on the draft choices faces. And we've seen that happening across most of the teams in the league doing something like that. And I think that's where, and even April 29th, the OHL priority selection and being back in the OHL office doing that and anchoring coverage there, it just felt like we're back to normal. And fingers crossed we continue that. And certainly our thoughts are with people still dealing with what we've gone through over the last 2 years. We know for people it's not over, and they're still dealing with that. But I think for a lot of people it is that sense that we can kind of continue to have those social circles again and be at the rink and see those people. And I've had some work situations recently where we got a chance to see each other in 3-dimension, not just on Zoom with boxes. And it was so nice to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I think from that OHL standpoint and talking to Commissioner David Branch of the draft, it was just, so nice to be able to get back into what we've been so used to and probably took for granted for so long.
No question about that. I always look at where the long northern trips are going to be, the eastern swing, and there will be an eastern swing again this year. Those are things to look forward to. Just before I let you go, I know that you like to spend some time umpiring baseball, so you got maybe a soft spot for officials. Frankie Rocca is our guest on OHL Stories this week. Do you remember Rocks as a liney in this league?
I do. I don't know if we crossed paths a ton, but I know the name. You know what? Now I said we did cross paths a couple of times in person over the years in chat, and those guys have some amazing stories. And the travel those guys do and the time they put in on the road. You talk about players and everything like that, but they're some of the unsung heroes. The amount of time they put in and juggling full-time gigs too is a whole situation. Speaking of officials, very quickly, I'm hijacking this for a second. You of course had a donation to the Farwell for Hire the auction.
Yes, I did.
And give credit, Kevin Hastings.
You won that, didn't you?
I was the winner of that.
Yes, you were, because I remember
putting
it in a box and shipping it.
Yeah, I thought what a cool little, cool, and of course to support the cause and everything like that. But credit Kevin for getting involved as well. I thought, hey, why not? And the funny story is, a buddy of mine in Michigan collects OHL game worn jerseys. He probably has at least 100, if not more. He's got like a rack. It looks like a rack at the old Eaton's, just jammed with jerseys. I showed him. I said, "Yeah, but do you have a game worn officials jersey?" He's like, "No." I said, "I'm one up on you."
That's amazing. And that's the beauty of the Farwell for Hire campaign and the fundraising we do, because Hasty just reached out and said, "I've got this. Do you have a use for it? Will it help?" I'm like, "Of course it will." And next thing you know, Terry Doyle, the dean of the OHL, is the proud owner. As for Frankie Rocca, it's usually better, Terry, if we don't notice the officials on the ice, right?
Oh, that's exactly it. You look at that in the big picture, and they want that too, whether you're an umpire, a referee, you name it. You don't want to be noticed. You don't want to be, there was that time in the NHL, of course, and they do it now where they've taken the names off, because it's funny in the OHL. People recognize certain names, and, this guy could have the greatest game in the world, but they just remember that's the guy who's been around for a while. So they want to get the gears. But yeah, and you and I get a chance to talk to some of the officials over time, or run into them, downstairs for a coffee before the game, or, and sometimes even on the way out of the arena, run into them quickly. And yeah, the time they put in, the travels, you look at, the guys doing the final, Sean Reed working the final, lives in Ottawa, coming down to Hamilton. There's juggles with family time, there's juggles with work and having to do that. We'll see a couple officials from the OHL going out to St. John from the Memorial Cup. That's 12 days to arrange work from that standpoint too. Refereeing, officiating in the OHL is not paying the mortgage, but it's the passion they have. They do an excellent job. And yeah, they are certainly, you had Scott Hutchinson on earlier, back a year and a half ago, and Hutch is just loaded with stories, and so many of them have just some awesome stories. But yeah, it's the work they put in, and they're part of that team when it is the OHL.
It's funny. Hutch's name comes up in this podcast. Hasty's name comes up in this podcast. And you talk about no names on the back of the jerseys. That's right. Just a number. And Frankie Rocca has a really interesting and impactful story about the number that he has and why he has it. Here's Rocks on OHL Stories, the podcast. I got to start with the obvious, Frankie, because every chance I get to talk to somebody that has worn the stripes on the ice, one of the zebras, the hell were you thinking? Why would you get into officiating?
Well, that's a great question. My story is very different than most guys. I was playing hockey with a gentleman that was a referee, and I hated referees. I hated them. So he asked me one year, and I said, no, there's no way. And he says, listen, you're a good skater. Maybe you should try it. You're going to enjoy it. And I said, well, let me think about it. So a year passes, another year passes. So finally, the third year, I decide, you know what, I'm going to try. So I grab the gear. I go down to North Toronto rink, and they put us through paces. And one of the gentlemen there that was scouting for refs came down and said, can you come off the ice? I'm like, oh, am I in trouble? Did I say something to him? So he's like, can you come off the ice? I want to talk to you. And I said, sure. He goes, are you interested in skating our league? And I said, absolutely. I said, I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to, right? And he's like, well, you're a good skater. You shouldn't be out there with those guys and blah, blah, blah. And the story went on with me joining the league and having a great time at it. And one thing I can tell you, Mike, is I truly enjoyed every second of it. As hard as it may sound, some of the feedback that you got from different officials and different people around the hockey world, you'd be like, you know what, I think I am doing a good job. So with that, it kind of gives you motivation to do more. And that's what I tended to do. I enjoyed every single game I did, whether it was minor hockey all the way up to the OHL.
Okay, so many different directions to take this in. But let me back up half a step. You talked about the gentleman you played hockey with who was a referee, and you hated referees. So is it obvious if I ask the question why? Because they're always just messing up the game, right?
Well, they seem to, yeah, that's what I thought at that time, right? Yeah, you know, you're 20 years old and you just hated them. It was one of those things where you know, the thought process, they talk about your thought process and calling the penalty, and your thought process, your sight lines, and I wasn't aware of that, right? So you kind of like, what's he looking at? Why is he calling that? So you kind of figured out later on in life, when you became a referee, you figured out why. If I don't call that today or in this minute, in the last minute, if something happens, I still have to call that. So it kind of, you know, it's hard to sit back and look at it and say, I hated them. I didn't really hate the person. I just hated the call. So the person made the call, which kind of directs you to him, the official, let's call him the official. And it was like, you know what, I don't think that's a good call. And he'd be like, well, if I don't make that call now, what about if it happens in the last minute? So you kind of learn that process going through the officiating ranks. And then you think back, oh, that's why he did that, or that's why he told me that.
Is it important, Frankie, for you as an official to always keep that in mind? Because obviously you're getting an earful most every night you're out there, and you have to separate yourself, the person, and say, they're not mad at me necessarily. They're upset at what's happening or the call. But I'm guessing you have to keep yourself in that mindset.
You do, because they're not making the call towards you. They're making the call, a hockey call. Okay. I think that when you kind of separate that, you become a better official and a better person. I'm going to tell you some stories here, Mike, because I was very shy. Like you look at me like that. Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I would not have guessed that from the Frankie Rocca I've gotten to know.
Exactly. So I was very shy as 20, between the ages of 25 to 30. I was a really shy person, even before that. But growing up in the business world, I was a very shy guy. I wouldn't talk in a room, or I wouldn't approach people, anything like that. And refereeing or officiating has taught me that it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to be right, but you need to talk your way out of it or talk your way into it. So with that being said, I was very, very, when I started officiating, it broke it broke me to a point where I can talk to a guy like Mike, or I can talk to, you know, a hockey player, a GM, a scout. So it all kind of stems from officiating.
How vocal were you on the ice in terms of managing that game, talking to those players, even the coaches, etc.?
I was very vocal. As a linesman, you needed to be vocal. You know, I took shots from Drew Doughty. Like, and you needed to be vocal, because if you're not vocal, if they don't know, like the elite players that we talk about, John Tavares, you have your Stamkos, those guys knew where they were all the time. They knew where you were standing. They know exactly where you were at any time of the game. So as an official, if you were standing in the wrong spot, you were going to get hit. And if you were standing in the right spot, you were still going to get hit. So you needed to be vocal, on dump ins or offsides or anything like that, even with the coaches. We'll get into that obviously later on, but you needed to be vocal. And I was probably the loudest in the rink. And I enjoyed it because I could talk, right? Now, being shy, coming out of that shell, and now I can't stop talking. So
That makes you perfect for this podcast, Frankie. That's why we're here, right?
exactly.
It's funny when you mentioned taking shots from Drew Doughty. I wasn't sure if it was verbal but now I understand what you mean. And I couldn't help but notice last night in Game 7 of the championship game, Sean Reed, the referee, got in the way of a clearing attempt from Arbor Jackeye right along the boards, and Jackeye, like it was a clapper, and Reed took it full on. But that happens out there, especially now that we're at the 4-man crew.
It does, and knowing Reader and Sean, let's call him Sean, but Sean was very, very good. He's a good official. Nobody wants to get hit. No official wants to get hit. But when you are hit, it's either at the wrong time and it ends up in front of the net. And luckily for him, it didn't. But you will get hit. I mean, it's something that you don't want to get hit at any time during the game. But if you're vocal enough, I think that that kind of, if you tell them where you are standing at certain times, they kind of look up, and they're so good. I mean, the OHL players are so good that they know where you are. And if they have, if whatever happens, if they're sitting in a corner and all of a sudden they turn around and they see you, they're not dumping the puck. They're going to hold on to it because they're that good.
You talk about Reader, Sean Reed, who just officiated his 1000th game this past season. When you're talking about being a vocal guy, maybe the loudest guy in the rink when you were on the ice, I can't help but think of a guy like Kevin Hasty, who we all know 1000 games as a liney, and you can always hear him in the rink. He's barking out instructions where he is, all these different things. Was there a guy, Frankie, while you were still officiating, that meant a lot to you as a mentor, that kind of helped you along?
Yes. There's been a few. You take Scott Hutchinson. He was probably the one official that you could always ask a question, not even when you're at the rink, even just to give him a call on the phone and say, hey, listen, this is what happened. I was refereeing junior A, or I was refereeing minor hockey. This is what happened. What do you think? What should I have done better? And he would give it to you. Whether you liked it or not, he's going to give it to you. And you never told him what you called until the end, because at the end of it, he'd say, what did you call? And so you tell him, okay, I called a minor penalty and this and that. And he'd be like, okay, good call. Dave Kojo is another one that we became close friends. There's been a lot. I mean, I can go on forever with that. But the two guys that I looked up to was Scott Hutchinson and also Dave Kojo.
Hutch has got quite the active social media presence. We got to get you on Twitter, Frankie, and the two of you can go back and forth. I'd love to listen to it.
I stay away from social media. I have it. I look at it. I kind of respond once in a while. I am not a big social media guy, but I'll look for sure. Like if I want to know something, it's easy enough to find any kind of information on anybody if you're looking for it. So I tend to kind of stay away from. Responding is a little different. I can watch it. Responding, I'm like, you know what? I don't need to get into a verbal beef, as they call it today, with somebody. So it's like, you know what? I'll stay away from it and go from there. But I see stuff, obviously, like everybody else.
I'm always interested from an official's point of view about the process, because again, and you started this conversation by talking about how you as a player hated referees. We know that they are the officials in the game are the people that we often lay a lot of blame on. What's the process like, though, Frankie, for you to develop as an official in the Ontario Hockey League? And by that I mean, after every game, Is there a review? Are you getting constant feedback, room for improvement, things like that?
Listen, I'll start off by saying this. When I was that official that told me that to join the ranks of the officiating crews, told me that I was too old. Okay. Which is a fair statement. But what I tended to do a little bit different than everybody else is, and you'll see the elite guys will do this, is you have a rule book in the washroom, you have a rule book in your car, you have a rule book in your bag, and you read it any time. You can pick it up. So at work, if I went to the washroom at work, which probably 20 minutes at a time, you'd read a couple of rules, right? And driving to the rink, I'd be in the back seat, I'd take out the rule book, I'd read one rule, I put it away. So those, to be a good official, you need to know the rule book. Okay. But there's also another part, which when I was coming up, they called game management, right? So you talking to the coach or you're talking to a player, in order for you to be a better official, you either talk them up or talk them down. You said Kevin Hastings. Hastings, if you watched on the game, I think it was game 6 in Windsor. What's his name now? Steos.
Yep.
So he was going a bit crazy, right? Because something happened. And Hastings just kept talking to him, calmed him down a bit, and told him to go to the box. So those are the things that are going to make you a good official. Knowing the rules will make you a better official, but talking to somebody and understanding what they're going through at the time of a situation makes you a better official, because you can talk them down, right? Or as they say, you can talk them out of it. Okay. Those are some of the things that the good officials can do, whether you're a linesman and or wearing the bands as a referee. So I think that in order to be a good official, and talking people makes you a better official on the ice. Okay. And even with the coaches, like if something happened and you talk to the coach, as we're probably going to get into, then they see what you see, but they also have what they call replay that they can watch. You can't watch replay today, right? Today, only all 4 officials can watch a replay of some sort if there's a call made that was right or wrong. But back then, when I was doing it, there was no replay. So, you talked yourself out of stuff. If you got yourself into trouble, then you would talk yourself out of trouble. So yeah, and making the right call at the right time. So we talk about sight lines. If you're in the right sight line and you see a penalty, then you call the penalty, right? Whether it's in the first minute or the last minute. So that will kind of make you a better official by doing those things. If you tend not to call them, then we're back into the trouble category.
It's interesting you mention instant replay, because I couldn't help but notice, again, I'll just reference last night's game 7, and it was I believe it was Hamilton's second goal.
Yeah.
And they took a look at it for a potential high stick. And then even while that review was going on, you could see Mark Savard and his coaching staff on the iPad at the bench looking, and then they asked for a further challenge to check for goaltender interference. But could you imagine doing the job that these officials are still doing today? You mentioned replay wasn't around when you were still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You imagine having that be a part of the game? Changes everything.
Yeah, it does. It changes a lot of things. I mean, but those, you're talking about game 7, right? So game 7 is very important to both teams, to the officials as well, because everybody moves on, right? So if they get the call wrong, then that's up to the league to decide what they're going to do. But I was watching it, and 2 things I said to myself is, he's going to ask for a different review. He's going to challenge it. And sure enough, he pointed to center ice, and I said, he's going to go over to the bench. I was watching with my son, and I said, he's going to ask for goaltender interference because the glove came up, right? So and you could see it. You could read his lips, actually, and they challenged it, and they lost that too. But, those are some of the calls that the officials will obviously go and try and get a better view of it. To be honest, I couldn't tell whether it was a high stick or not. It hit something. It was high. It went down quickly. I don't know if the Windsor player hit it. I couldn't see. From our angles, from the TV angles, obviously, I couldn't tell. So
Are- you alluded to it a moment ago. Let's get into those interactions. We'll start with coaches. And I'm thinking, because we didn't get to cross paths enough, frankly,
No.
Frankie, because you were in mostly Eastern Conference stuffs. But I'm thinking over on that side, George Burnett's over there, Stan Butler's over there, Killer's over there. I mean, was there a coach that you had an interaction with that was very memorable?
Oh, there's been a few, but all good. All good. I'll start off with Mike Stothers from Owen Sound. So we were in Owen Sound for probably the first time I met the gentleman, right? So I'm looking at this, he's like 6 something, and I'm like, oh, this could be good if something goes wrong, right? So there was a quick play right at his blue line where he was standing, and he starts up one side of me, up down the other side of me. That wasn't offside, and sure enough, it was offside. He went into the room, looked at it, came out and said, "You were right." And I said, "Okay." So we get into Brampton. It was the very next day. So Saturday night in Owen Sound, Sunday afternoon in Brampton. So I get to Brampton, I get on the ice for warm up and get back into the room. We go on the ice for the game. And I go up to Mike and I said, "Hey, Mike, how are you?" He says, "Good. How are you?" And I said, "Great." I said, "This morning I went to the eye doctor and I got my visor changed. So now I'm good. I got 20/20 vision." Well, he starts to laugh. And we chuckled, right? It started the game. We chuckled. And ever since then, I've had nothing but the respect for that man that, if there's ever a situation, I remember calling him when he was with Atlanta at the time, the Atlanta Thrashers, I believe they were called in the NHL. I called him up and I said, "How are you? Are you coming to Toronto?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I would just come and say hi." He says, "Absolutely." So I had tickets. I went down to the Air Canada Center at the time and met up with him, chatted for a bit, and he went on his way and I went on my way. It was all good. There was no animosity, obviously. And, I respect them. I respect the job that they did. You got to remember one thing. I was told this long time ago: coaches that coach in the OHL make a living at doing it. So if they're yelling at you, that's, it's par for the course. I mean, but just respect. All I wanted from any official or even officials, but any official, any coach or any player, I'm respecting you, just respect me back. And that was my so-called the thing that I love the most is the respect factor. And I have to do a job. I know you have to do a job, but respect the call and everything is going to be good. Am I going to make a mistake on purpose? Absolutely not. If I miss it, then I missed it. And I'll own up to it if I do miss it. Okay. We go to Killer. Killer was a good story. So I noticed you had Washer on.
Yes, just recently.
So it was actually with Joel Washcroft. So Washer and I are doing the game. I can't remember the other 2 guys. And we get first period, it was 3-0 for Brampton. And after the 3rd goal, I'm looking at Killer, and Killer's looking at me, and he just starts ripping into Washer just for whatever reason. I don't know. There was no reason for it. He just, that's 3-0. So he's just ripping into Washcroft, and Washer's looking at me, and I'm looking at Washer, and I'm like, "Are you going to not do something about this?" Let him go. And he starts going again. Well, at the end of the conversation, he gives Washer a wink. And I thought to myself, okay, I get this. I know what's happening right now. He's trying to change the whole game in 30 seconds. And they won 4-3. So that just leads up to the younger officials that are getting yelled at, and they turn around and give the coaches a bench minor for just, they're doing it for a reason. Okay. If it starts to get personal, that's different. But if he's yelling for a high stick, or if he's yelling and he gives you a wink, that he's not yelling at you. He's just trying to change the whole game in 30 seconds. And that's what he did. And he was good at that. There's times where he would say something and he's, "Rocks, you missed that call." and he'd give you a wink, or you tell that referee that if he doesn't call the next penalty for them, I'm going to lose my mind. And I know what he was trying to do. So did I skate up to the ref and say, hey, ref, this is no, it's one of those things where you know what he's trying to do. And because I loved it so much that I knew he wasn't yelling at Washer. And sure enough, they won 4-3 that game, or 5-3. It could have been 5-3. I don't remember exact score, but I remember them winning after 3-0 in the first period. So
how long was your leash? Like, you talk about the younger officials today, they might be quicker to give a bench minor. Like, what did you have a point where you're like, okay, enough is enough if it got too personal, anything like that?
yeah, I had a long, I didn't have a short fuse. I still don't. I mean, my fuse with the game of hockey it's very long. And like I said, if you understand the game, if you played the game, if you officiated the game, you kind of know why they're doing it. I coached as well, so I knew, and I see with the younger guys, you couldn't really start off with, hey guys, this is what's going on, I'm going to start yelling at you. Or you didn't want your players to know, so you give them a wink first, because minor hockey is different than junior hockey, right? So you wanted to make sure that they understood that you're not yelling at them. You're just giving them, I'm yelling because I want these guys to do something, right? And it kind of worked out that way in minor hockey. So with that being said, there are times where if you do end up making a mistake, and they have the right to give it to you a little bit to a certain degree. But most guys, that I talk to in the hockey world, they're like, oh, no, he's going to call another penalty. No, he's not going to call another penalty on you just because you yelled at him, because everything is forgotten 3 seconds later, because you can't hold that grudge. You cannot hold that grudge when you're refereeing a hockey game. If a coach is yelling at you for a mistake, it's forgotten 3 seconds later on all sides, not just the referee side, the coaches as well. Sometimes where you question them to a point where, hey, I made a mistake on the ice, but you do the same mistake. You can make the same mistake by sending out the wrong guy. So, those things are kind of, I don't want to say that they're kind of like unwritten rules, but at the same time, I think that if you know the process, then it's easier to get along with everybody, right?
We all know that referees take the brunt of the abuse because they're making the penalty calls. But we also all know, Frankie, that it's the lines people, because, and we'll talk about Kirsten Welch in a bit,
Yes.
but lines people have the hardest job out there. You're skating a hell of a lot more. And of course, when things get out of hand, you're the ones that have to get in there and start breaking it up. Was there ever a time, I'm sure in the moment of the game when it's happening, you just go do your job, but maybe before the game begins, when you've got a couple of heavyweights out there or something like that, where you're thinking, oh man, I might be in for a day here?
Yes. Yes. So Zach Cassian
Oh yeah,
and Kyle Neuber. You remember Kyle Neuber?
I do
St.
indeed.
Mike's?
Yep.
Okay, so they were in Peterborough one night, and I'm standing there. And in warm up, you just stand there and you just watch what's going on. You skate around. If you want to stretch, you stretch. And I started to notice these guys are starting to talk to each other. And I thought to myself, there's something going on here. So let me go in between, like the blue line. They wouldn't cross center, so you kind of have that as your barrier. So you skate up, and I'm looking at Zach and I'm looking at Kyle, and they're chirping at each other. And I'm like, you guys can't go right now. You realize that? And they're like, yeah, we know, but we're trying to set it up and everything. And I said, well, that's not a good idea right now. I said, can you guys go and do your job, warm up and do your stretches or whatever you need to do, but don't do it here. And if you watch it, it's on YouTube and everything. So I'm watching, and these guys are just chirping at each other. Some of the things that they're saying, just doesn't make sense to me, right? So I'm like, can you guys just go away? So we get in the room, and usually when you're in the room, you say, okay, I don't remember who I was with that game, but hey, this looks like they're going to go at some point during the game. It could be the first minute, could be the first 10 seconds. We don't know. So you look at the lineup card, and they're kind of like, Neuber was not starting, but Zach was, And once they hand in the lineup card, they can't switch it, right? So we get on the ice and within first period, they started to fight. And it was you watch it on YouTube. It was a good fight. Okay. But do I agree with them setting it up? No. Do I think that it needed it at that time in the game? I'm 50% on that. I didn't like the fighting because I've seen so many guys get hurt watching the fighting. Now it's kind of if there's a fight, it could be one every 50 games. It's more skill now. But there were some tough guys that Andrew Shaw comes to mind, right? And he wasn't that big, but he was tough. Greenop from Windsor, he was another tough one. So yeah, there's been a couple of guys where you get in and you get punched in the head. You could feel it.
It's interesting how we kind of mellow with age, and you already mentioned your own son, and I think that changes our perspective on fighting in the game, doesn't it? Because we're thinking of our own kid being out there and what might happen to them and so on and so forth. What do you think of the game today versus when you were on the ice with these players?
At that time, when I was reffing, officiating or lining, it started to change. You started to see more and more skilled guys come into the league, and you didn't see the tougher guys. But that was near the end of no, at the beginning. I would say right at the beginning, there was some tough guys, and then 2 years in, kind of went downward, where there wasn't. I mean, the game of hockey is so. If you're watching the NHL right now, you could tell it's fast. It is fast. So the skill level in the OHL is a lot higher than it was, because there's no real what they call tough guys anymore. There are fights, but they're middleweight fights, right? Did it need it at that time? I don't know, Mike. Did we kind of call it soft in our old age, but no, I don't think it like you look at Washer and you look at, what he did, and there's some guys like Washer around, obviously. And really right now, there's no need. I don't think there's any need for fighting because the speed is so fast. And if somebody's chasing somebody, they work out every day now that they can handle themselves if they need to, but I don't know if there's a call for a fight unless somebody does something crazy, but it is, go ahead. Sorry.
Who's the player you remember with the highest skill? Like, I wonder sometimes if you're out there and you don't get caught being a fan for even half a second sometimes.
Well, there's been many times where believe me, guys that come to mind right away are, your John Tavares, your Connor McDavid. Like Connor McDavid was just, you looked at him in warm up and you'd be like, whoa. Matt Duchene. I used to go to the rink maybe an hour and a half before a game, an hour 45 before a game, and he'd be stick handling in the hallway, and he'd get on the ice and he'd be in his running shoes and stick handling just right at the door of the ice. And how is he doing that? And you go home and try it, and it'd be like, how does he do that? So, and Stamkos was another one. I mean, the list is so long, Mike. I could sit here all day talking about those guys. Are just like, you could tell that they were over and above everybody else. But everybody says, what about Andrew Shaw? Well, Andrew Shaw was good. I mean, he was tough, but he was skillful, right? So many different guys. I can't even remember them all, but there's so many of them. So many.
Well, and you bring up Duchene, and I remember when I was introduced, not personally to him, but he was brought to my attention because he was not initially the guy getting all of the press in Brampton.
No.
Right. And then you start, like, somebody gives you the little nod and you're like, you start watching the guy a little bit more closely and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, Cody Hodgson and all these guys, they're okay. But this Matt Duchene kid, look out, pretty special.
he's and to top it all off, he's a very nice. I still call them kids because when I was, it's so bad because I when I was officiating, they were 15, 16, 17, 18. They're kids, right? And now you look at them, they're having kids, and it's like they're adults. So every time I refer to them, I refer them as kids, but they're not kids anymore. So I have to catch myself. With Matt, I remember him the last face-off in Brampton. I looked at him and I said, "This is going to be the last time I drop the puck with you. You're going to be in the NHL next year. Good for you." And he looked at me and says, "Thanks." And that was it. Now, remember, when you're officiating certain teams every single week or every second week, do you're talking to the players, and then it doesn't get personal, right? You don't want it to get personal because you have a job to do. So I kind of separated that. I talked to them. I said, "How are you? How was your the day at school?" Whatever the case may be, and they would respond to it, but it wouldn't get personal because it can't get personal. So I tried to keep that integrity of the game in the game, so I wouldn't be able, like, there's no conversations away from hockey type thing. But to watch them on the ice, like I got caught a couple of times. Just did he just do that? It was like, a referee. I'm going to give you a name, Hutchie. Did he really do that? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, holy, like that's just incredible. But for instance, here's a good one for you. We went to Kitchener, and Kitchener had Erie in town. This when McDavid came in. He was probably in around halfway through the season. Okay, so I'm standing at center ice, and I heard about this kid, Connor McDavid, and they called him something else, right? And I'm watching him and skating around the ice, and he's doing some stuff in warm up. And I skate over to the other side, and it could have been Hastings, it could have been somebody else. I skate, and did you just see what he just did on the ice? He's like, no. And I said, watch, he's going to do it again. And he comes around, he does it again. And it's just a quick movement, right? It's just for us watching it. I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to do a quick move, backhand to forehand or forehand to backhand, so he can cut to the net. And he's doing this like with just ease. And I'm like, he's 15 years old. And he did, and look at him now, right? So they talk about his speed. All the commentators on TV and TSN and whatever else you want to call, that's all they talk about is how fast is he? He's like, 50 kilometers an hour on the ice. And I saw that when he was 15, right? We all saw it. All the officials saw it at 15, and he was fast at 15. And to see him now, it'd be like, you know what? He did a good job. I mean, he worked out every chance he got. He's always on the ice, and that's where he is right now. And that's, the best player in the world right now. So it's all good.
You're enough years out of the game now, we can talk about this. And it doesn't mean you did a better or a worse job in those particular barns, but you must have had a favorite. You must have had a least favorite.
To be honest, no, I didn't.
Really?
I didn't have Mike, when they gave me my schedule, there was no, oh, I hate going here. I never said that to anybody. I never said it to myself. I looked at it, I put it on my calendar, and I would wait for the day to go to the rink. It didn't matter where it was. I was built different. I was always, guys would talk, first year in the league or second year in the league. When you get to 5 years, it's going to get kind of boring. You get to go to a different rink all the time, and it's going to take you an hour and a half to get there. And I'd be like, you know what? If it takes me 45 minutes, it takes me 2 hours to get there, I'll enjoy every minute going to the rink and coming back from the rink. So for me, I loved it. And my wife could tell you the same thing. I love the game of hockey. I always did. And to be an official and sharing the ice with these guys, and they actually invited us on their ice to referee a hockey game. And I enjoyed every minute of it.
You're a better man than I am. And in fairness, I mean, I like to rip. It's been a few years now of traveling around. So the travel sometimes gets to me, but damn if I don't love the destinations. It doesn't even matter. Like Sault Ste. Marie, obviously the longest trip we take, but oh, I love it up there. And the community and the way they love their hounds and so on and so forth. So, I might bitch and moan about the trip or the time of the trip or whatever the case may be, but the destination and the game that happens then in front of my eyes, definitely worth it every time.
Yeah, see, on Saturdays usually it was Owen Sound. Owen Sound from where I live in Bolton is 2 hours. So that 2 hours for me, I would drive myself there, depending on where the guys were coming from, but I would meet them there with I drive up there, and that was my time, like to kind of think and my next move, or kind of concentrate on what's going to happen, because I there was some dandies in Owen Sound, right? So on this side you had Phil Reskovich against Theo Peckham. So those games that they were both on, I want to be in my own head going up there, and I didn't mind the 2 hours. I didn't mind coming back to 2 hours, so that was never a deal with me. Um, you know, the assigners would give you games, and I would never turn away games. I've never turned one game away in junior A or in the OHL. And it was just because I loved it so much. I don't know if a lot of guys could say that, to be honest.
You mentioned Bolton, so I'll just use that as a cue to bring up the first time I met you in person away from the rink with your buddy Dave Ecclestone and the Rock and Stone Sports Show. I came up to your studios there in Bolton. How was that? How did that first foray into media happen, Rocks?
Well, Dave is a big gentleman that wants to do a lot of things, and invited me to do a couple of shows with him. So I did that. I mean, it was kind of fun, but it wasn't me. Like I said, I was a very shy person. I could never, like, I was very shy about being on any kind of radio. So because it was local, and the local stuff was happening around Bolton, with the Calden minor hockey, I just gave it a shot. I mean, did I enjoy it? I don't. Being on the ice, I enjoyed being on the ice. You know what I mean? It was a lot of fun for me. I think it put a smile on my face. If I was having a rough day, I would just think about the rink, and everything would go away, type thing, for that moment. But I loved every second of it. I did. I don't miss it. I don't miss it.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask that, because I guess when we have these conversations, we reminisce and it feels pretty good, but it almost sounds, look, our time comes for every one of us. The time comes, and especially when you're an on ice official, there's kind of a best before date. You don't get to go on forever and ever, but it's interesting. You say you don't miss it. Why not?
I don't miss it because of the fact that I think that the game has changed so much, and doing a job like that, it takes a lot of toll on you, right? Your body, as you get older, it gets lengthier to recover from certain things. I miss one part of it, and I'll tell you the part I miss is being on the ice and talking to whoever will listen to me. Right? It's just one of those things where I interact with people now, and refereeing or officiating has taught me that. If I didn't officiate, I don't think I'd be the way I am right now. I think I would be more reserved. But that has taught me it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to talk and make a mistake, because I always thought that if I was talking and I made a mistake, that they would either, laugh at me or do whatever. You kind of teach your kids not to be afraid anymore. And you teach them that. And that's what officiating taught me. And I think that's why I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the fact that I was on the ice. I could talk. Nobody can tell me, hey, you made a mistake. They could if you make a mistake, but it was more of a kind of getting out of your shell. It's basically how it worked. At the beginning, when I first started to referee, I wouldn't talk in the room. I'd be quiet, sitting in a corner or whatever. And one of the guys just, hey, Frank, what's up? What's going on with you? And so you start, and then it transfers onto the ice. We talking to the players, right? All these kids that you're on the ice with are eventually, not all of them, but some of them will get drafted into the NHL. So you can always say that you talked to a guy that, made it to the NHL. And that's why I think I fell in love with it.
That part that you're talking about, how it brought you out of your shell to some degree, that talking to anybody who would listen to you on that day, makes me think about this game in this league, Frankie, from from my side of it as well. There are guys that I've worked with, I would call colleagues in other markets, that have gone on to the American Hockey League or the East Coast League or even the National Hockey League. I'm so happy for them. They use it as that stepping stone. And then there are other guys that have been around for as long as I have, or even longer, but you see them on the circuit all the time, and they become like, they're friends, they're part of the family, and you look forward to seeing them on weekends when you go and visit their city. And
Exactly.
that's what the league kind of does, right? So same for you as an official,
Mhm.
you're part of that bigger Ontario Hockey League family, aren't you?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's so like when I first started, it told me I was too old to go anywhere, and then kind of got in the rule book and you read, and then you meet people, right? You meet a guy like Mike, and you meet Mike Stothers, and you meet, you keep, the list goes on. I mean, we could sit here forever and talk about it, but you try, and you're a better person when you can talk yourself into or out of trouble. Okay, like officials they can talk themselves into trouble, and they can talk themselves out of trouble, right? And that's just the way it is. I mean, I think that for me, this is personal, that if I didn't have that refereeing or that officiating crew that you would go to the rink with, and that I can talk to the way I did and scream out loud in the rink, I think I felt free to say what I wanted to say to a certain degree. You couldn't go out there and swear, obviously, but you could say stuff that wouldn't, you wouldn't be or get in trouble for. Let's say that. But it just brought me out of my shell. Like I could never. I'm looking at my 25-year-old self, and I'm thinking to myself, how could you ever go through life not, being shy and not talking to people? So, I look at it as it did a lot of good for me, because I'm in an industry where I need to talk.
It's funny because I was a little bit younger, but true story. My father went to my 10th grade English teacher and said, "Could you try to bring Mike out of his shell a little bit, because he's so shy." And look at the two of us sitting here right now today.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, I applaud you for that, because I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Some people do it for different reasons, Mike. And I think my reason for doing it was I was pushed to a point where someone told me I couldn't do it. Right? You're too old. There's no way the OHL is going to look at you. You're probably, the best you could do is you're going to do minor hockey, and that's it. I'm like, okay, no problem. So did I prove him wrong? We talk. I still talk to him. I talked to him about a few months ago, and that story came up where he said, "You know what? You proved me 100% wrong. I told you were too old, and look what you did." And I said, I didn't do anything. They gave me an opportunity to be on the ice and share the ice with these amazing junior A players or OHL players. And I was happy to be there. So you kind of get that feeling where, being pushed to a certain degree, and all of a sudden you come out of your shell, and now I just pick up the phone and talk to anybody.
We mentioned her name earlier, and you talk about the barriers that you had to push through. Just imagine what Kirsten Welch faced on her way to becoming the first female official to work the lines in an Ontario Hockey League game. As you sit back now, retired from it, Frankie, are you looking at it saying, "Well, it's about damn time we got a woman in there"?
I'll tell you a story. And yes, absolutely, 100%. I would invite any woman on any ice to officiate a hockey game, because two things you're going to get is honesty, right, from a woman, and they can definitely do the same job as a man. Okay. My first year in minor hockey, I refereed with an official that was a female, and she was the best female official that I've ever seen, including the men. And I was like, how are you not in the NHL? Okay. And that's coming. And I hope that comes pretty soon, because I think that the women can do the same job as a man can. Okay. And I think that if given the opportunity to be on the ice, they can show you that they can do the same job. And it has nothing to do with gender, because females can do the same job as a man. They can skate the same way. Okay. The power might be different. That's probably the only thing that's different is a power from a man compared, but they are just as well as we can, as men can do it, they can do it as well. And I think I think that I would be very surprised if in the next couple of years, there's not a female that's going to referee in the NHL or line in the NHL because they can do the job.
Yeah,
So,
and the Ontario Hockey League has really proven itself to be pretty progressive in this regard, right? Taya Curry being drafted by the Sarnia Sting, it goes on from there, right?
yes, exactly. And I think that they're, we keep going back to a story, but I could tell you a story. I could even get you the book if you want to see it. But I coached whoops, did I lose you?
No, we're still good.
Okay. I coached a female, okay, for years. And she was probably one of the best defensemen I've ever seen. And she is going to a college in the US now. And she sent me a book thanking me because she's what, 17 now, 18 now. And she wrote that not given just because of you giving me the opportunity to be on a boys team, I think that's what made me get my she got a scholarship. I can't remember the name of the university in the US, but she's going to university for it. So good for her. Right. And that's why I say women can do can they do it the same way? It's the job is calling the penalty. So for an official, to me, they're the same.
Sure.
I invite it. I do a signing up here in Caledon we have one female official, and I reached out to her at the beginning of last season and I said, do you have any more? Because, do you know any other women that want to referee? Because I'd be more than happy to invite them onto to staff. Because like I said, why is it different? You know what I mean? If I had a daughter, why would it be different? I have 3 sons, right? So their opportunities would be different. But if I had 3 daughters, I'd want them to have the same opportunity as a boy or as a man, right?
When you look back, Frankie, on the career that you had, the rinks that you were in, the roads that you traveled, can you pick a memory? Does anything stand out as that was the highlight?
The highlight is every night being at the OHL rink. I'm being honest with you, Mike. That was my, it's more, I don't know if it was more of just because of the fact that I was in love with the game, that I wanted to be on the ice. I couldn't tell you if it was that I feel free. No, I felt like as soon as I put that jersey on, I knew I was going on the ice, and I love to be on the ice and in a rink. Can I give you one highlight? No, they were all highlights. They were all, I'm being honest. They were, I can't pick one. There was a bunch of stories, obviously, but the best rink I think was London, was a London trip. When you were in London, you knew there's 10,000 people. Don't make a mistake. So don't make a mistake. And my first year and my first game was in Belleville. So I got a call from the office and they said, okay, you're going to Belleville with Dave Kozel and Ben Buxton. I said, okay. Call Cozy. Here's his number. Call him up. Tell him, I knew Cozy at the time. So I called him up and I said, hey, Dave, it's Frank. He goes, hey, what's up? I go, I'm going to Belleville with you on Saturday. He goes, yeah, I just heard. And I said, okay, where do you want me? He says, meet me at my house. I said, okay. So I end up going to his house and Mike from Newmarket, I think he lived, no, Richmond Hill. I'm sorry. From Richmond Hill to Belleville. I think I probably had to use the bathroom about 100 times. I was like, wow. Okay, here I am, and I'm going to get a jersey when I get to the rink. They're going to give you a jersey. They're going to give you, I can't even remember what else, the pair of pants or something. So I get to the rink. We get out. We get inside the dressing room, and I'm sitting in this small room, and I'm looking at Cozy, and Cozy's looking at me, and I'm like, Cozy, is this really happening right now? He's like, yeah, we're gonna go on the ice. I look out, and this thing is huge. It was like the Olympic size rink, right? And I'm
Yep.
like, oh my Lord, what's happening right now? So get changed, go on the ice. And to this day, I could tell you I was scared. I was like scared. I'm like, if I make a mistake, I'm done. Like, what are you going to do? So I get on the ice and I boot around the rink and everything is good. Game goes well. I get a call Monday saying I'm on staff, and I was happy, obviously. But that game was probably the one that I was scared. I was scared. And I told Cozy that. I said, he goes, you'll be fine. I'm on the ice with you. And I said, okay, fine, fair enough. But if there's a mistake made, just let me know what the mistake so I can fix it. So yeah, it was good. It was exciting.
Amazing. Do you do they assign you a number, or do you get to pick it? When you mentioned that jersey, I just thought of it.
Yeah. I picked my number because my dad died when he was 38. So that's the reason for that. Yeah. So it is what it is right now. But yeah, it was tough. So when he passed at 38, and they asked in the OHL, what number do you want? First thing that came to my mind was number 38. So
Boy,
yeah. So I wore that for how many years?
a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of years, Rocks. A lot of
Yeah.
years you were patrolling those lines in the
Yeah.
Ontario Hockey League, my friend.
Yes, sir.
This has been just great to catch up with you. We got to do it in person, okay? And the first beer is on me.
Okay, fair enough. I don't drink though, Mike. What are we gonna do? You have to buy me a Coke.
I'll buy you a Coke or a water or a Gatorade, whatever you want, Frankie. The first round's on me.
No problem.
Buddy, thanks a lot for doing this. It's so much fun to catch up.
Thank you. Take care.